All right, so let's just start out with just the basics. What is the census and why do we do it?
Right. So, good question. It makes sense to understand the ways and the whys, right? So, the census is a 10-year count. The decennial census, every 10 years, there's a count that's taken of everybody that lives in the country. And for people who have a religious background, I mean, this is like when Mary Joseph and like when she was pregnant with baby Jesus, when they were going back to Bethlehem, they were going back for the census to be counted. So, this is something that governments have always done as a way of knowing, where do I put my money? If I've got 100 people who live in my whatever it is, or if I've got 500 people who live in my town or 600 people who live in my school district, how do I allocate money for those people? If I've got different groups of people, how do I determine who gets how much money for buses, who gets how much money for schools, who gets how much money for the teachers in the schools, for the hospitals, for the roads, for the stop signs? How do we determine if this intersection needs a stop sign versus a stop light? What type of traffic is going down these streets? Do we need more lanes on the highway? How do we know that? And we know that because we know how many cars are driving back and forth. And we don't know how many cars are driving back and forth unless we have a count for the census. So what's really important is that we are clear, one, that the census is something that happens every 10 years. It is mandated by the Constitution, right? And so the Constitution requires that every 10 years we are engaging with the census and we are going out and counting to get a snapshot of who is there, what their needs are, and that's going to determine how we spend our money.
Very good. And for those of you who have not looked at the Constitution recently, please call the office of one of your elected officials and get you a little pocket guide.
And Google is a friend
Google
too.
Is
yes.
a friend when it comes to the Constitution. Absolutely. Very good.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So we understand that the government conducts a census survey every year.
Yes.
So what's the big deal about the Census 2020? Because they do this every year.
They do it every 10 years. And in between those 10 years, they have other types of surveys to continue to gathering the information. The American Community Survey is one. Every month when the labor and statistic numbers come out, those numbers are drawn from data that is similar to a survey like the census. The difference with the census is that every 10 years, our budget numbers are locked and set in based on the data we get from the census. So unlike those other surveys, it's $675 billion with a B, $675 billion every year that gets spent and allocated based on census data. So if you don't fill out the census, and your kids show up to school that didn't have a census count accurately monitoring who was in the school community, you may wind up with your children being taught in portable trailers, because when the government decided that we took our census, we got a count of the numbers, we know who's here, and we know that based on the numbers that we got, there are enough classrooms here for 20 kids per class, because that's what the census numbers showed. But if half the community didn't fill out the census and 40 kids per class show up, that begins to create a whole other host of problems. If the census figure said that we need hospitals that are going to provide services for families with young children, because families with young children filled out the census, then those are the types of medical services that are going to get funneled to that community. However, if a whole bunch of senior citizens live in that community and those senior citizens didn't fill out the census, they're not going to get the senior citizen services that they need. And so we'll have a community that is flush with after-school programs, child care programs, but no bus routes or assessor ride or train passes with discounts for seniors, no transportation systems that can accommodate wheelchairs, because if no one is telling that there are wheelchairs in this community and the buses need to have wheelchair accommodation, all of these things are tied into that snapshot and into that money. And I just realized I forgot what your actual question was. I just started rambling about census.
No. You were very clear about the fact that, because people heard that, okay, well, I just filled out this American survey.
Right.
Isn't that a part of the census? Absolutely it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's different from the 10-year census.
Right. Because the money allocation is tied. That's right. It's all about the money.
All about resources.
All about the money.
And so when I think about the census, I think about resources and representation. And
yes.
we'll get to that.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. So tell us about your role at SJ, the role of the Center for Law and Social Justice, and then talk to us about that very special group that you guys have formed.
Yes.
New York Black Coalition Leadership.
Yes. Oh, and I see people who are commenting and asking questions. Hello, everybody. Yes, I am doing an interview. I am here with the lovely Stefani Zinerman, who you can see right over there, from the Brooklyn branch of the NAACP. And we're here talking about census and census issues and how all of those issues relate to Pan-African communities. So thank you for joining. Yes. And could you repeat your question one more time, Stefani?
So I want to talk about your role.
Yes.
I want to talk about the Center for Law and Social Justice, and then I want to talk about the New York Black Leadership Coalition.
Okay, great. So So the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College is a 32, almost 33-year-old racial justice law center. And our mission is to use the law to impact communities of African descent and the disenfranchised. And we do that in a variety of ways, both in terms of filing litigation when necessary, going into court when necessary, community education programs, campaigns that are designed to address a variety of issues when litigation alone won't work. We have a lot of our key pillars are in voting rights and voter protection. We look at ending systemic racial violence, both in policing and in vigilante communities or acts of violence, which have been really all over the news lately, right? Educational equity, and what does that look like for African descendant children? So yes, we want to ensure that African descendant children are getting a quality education, but we define that not as busing programs, but as programs that are designed to meet those children, the needs of those children, wherever they may be. Part of one of the big issues that we deal with is census and engagement, because the census is tied to so many of those other things. So for the past 3 census counts, that goes back to 2010, 2000, and 1990, CLSJ has activated Nick Black for census. So we had Nick Black census 2000, hey, and Nick Black for census 2010, and now we have Nick Black census 2020. And Nick Black stands for the New York City Black Leadership Advisory Coalition for the census. And our goal is to communicate to Pan-African communities across the 5 boroughs of New York City, and really throughout the country. So if anywhere you're hearing this, it's applicable, right? Even though our area of focus is New York City, and really is designed to, one, educate people about what census is, how it relates to us, why we should care, why we should stop hiding from the census, why we should put all the information in the census that they're asking for, all of those things, and really making sure that African descendant communities are having their needs centered in this process, because it does impact all of those things that we've already mentioned. It also really impacts political power. And so we actually this Tuesday on May 15th are having our 4th meeting of Nick Black, and that's going to be here in New York City. Yes, that's right. And if you would like additional information, you can contact Center for Law and Social Justice, and the number there is 718-804-8893. Once again, that's 718-804-8893, and you can find out information. You can register for the event online if you go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/Center for Law and Social Justice, and you can find the registration link. But we're essentially going to be focusing on, this meeting is going to be focusing on outreach and how do we talk to communities that may be very fearful of government authorities for good reason, right? I always say when Black people say we are afraid of the census or we're afraid of government, we got reason to be. Yes. So, our goal is to help ameliorate that fear and to really educate people, let them know about the job opportunities that exist with census. We'll be focusing a lot of that on Tuesday, and really using our campaign as a way of outreaching and as a way of linking Pan-African communities that tend to be a little disparate, so that, yes, we can mobilize around this issue, but so that we can also use the political power that we amass from this to address other issues within the community.
It was definitely one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation. Because
Yay.
I think people hear about it, they don't know how that they can be a part of it, and we're going to go a little deeper in that conversation as we move forward. So, the census is about resources, as I said before, and representation. Can you give us a couple of more concrete examples of how neighborhoods will be impacted if residents choose not to participate in the census?
That's a good question. So for people who didn't hear online, she's asking what can be the negative implications of communities that don't fill out the census form. And someone had just asked on Periscope, actually, they were asking if the cost of living and the size of African descendant communities, how has that changed and shifted over the past few years? It's important to know that Pan-African descendants, and I'm intentionally saying Pan-African descendants instead of Black, because Black can be a very politicized term depending on where you come from.
And we're going to talk about that later on.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
But of the quarter of the New York City population that is comprised of African descendant people, about a third of us are Black immigrants who came from countries that are predominantly African descendant in nature. And so the cost of living has not decreased at all, but our portion and our numbers are definitely increasing. So let's say you're a community that has reason to be fearful of the census, as many of us do, right? Because the census is essentially a survey that's asking you to talk about information that you may want to keep private, right? It's asking you who lives in your household, what types of services do you need, what languages do you speak, and it's asking questions that for communities that have been traditionally marginalized, this feels very invasive and very personal. But there is a phenomenon that takes place with regards to the census that has really negative implications for our communities, and that's in the area of overcounts and undercounts. So I want you to imagine a community, or a family. Let's let's take a family. It's a white family. There's two parents. There are grandma and grandpa. You've got three kids. Maybe one's in college, a high schooler, and a middle school student. They come from a community, typically white communities, that are very actively engaged with filling out census because civic engagement is sort of baked into the white American experience for many ways, for many people. And so mom is going to fill out a form. Parents are going to fill out a form. Grandparents are going to fill out a form. If they have a summer home, they're going to fill out a form for their summer home. If they have junior at college is going to call the Census Bureau and get a form so that junior in college can fill out a form. They're going to report all the kids in the household. They're going to report the dog, the cat, the gerbil. Everybody is going to get reflected on the census form. So what does that mean for that community that's actively engaged? That means they're going to get those senior citizen services. They're going to get services for adults who are transitioning into senior citizen status. They're going to get college support funding for college students because they have this information that says junior is here and junior's away at college. So junior is going to have a high school program that is going to have information for how to get into school, how to get scholarships, how to get access to tutoring and the support services that you need. The young people are going to have access to school bus systems, right? They're going to be able to get on the bus in the morning because everyone there is going to know that this community lives here. Then you have another community or another family. Maybe they live in the same town and they're on the other side of town. And this is a black family. There's two parents. There's grandparents. There's junior. There's a who's away at college. There's the two kids who are at home. Because of the historical fears, rational fears that African descendant communities have, maybe a parent is going to fill out a form. Grandparents is, baby, I ain't telling the government, we ain't doing that. They ain't none of their business. I don't want them in their business. What you gonna use my information for? Reasonably suspicious, because the history would suggest that when we give up information or we give access to the government to black spaces, that we often don't benefit. So we understand why. But what does that mean for that family? That means that there's not going to be the same allocation of college level preparation funding because junior isn't filling out a form and parents may not even be recording that junior still technically lives in the house even though junior is away at school. It means that young brother and young sister who are still at the household aren't going to have school bus services with enough spaces for everyone to take the bus. So mom and dad are going to have to figure out a way to get junior to class. It means that there aren't going to be senior citizen services. And we saw that actually in Brooklyn a few years ago where bus lines that were heavily populated by senior citizens were being cut. And the question was, why are you cutting all these services? And the sort of informal response was, well, we didn't know all of you were here because nobody filled out the census form. Now, I don't want to oversimplify and say that the only reason black communities don't get access to resources is because we're not filling out the census. We know that is not true. We know that even when there is an opportunity to distribute resources and funding, that black communities are going to tend to be the last ones to get those allocations because we tend to be the least politically empowered. Political power is also affected by the census because who gets a representative? What group of people get a representative in Congress, in your city council, in your state government houses, in your federal government houses? All of that is based on the numbers of people in your community. So we want so bad to get black people into elected office. When they get there, they're going to need budget numbers so that they can provide the services that we want them to have. But the number of representatives we have in that office is based on how many people are filling out the census form. So when various municipalities or city council districts they're shrunk, or the borders expand, or they have to take on, it looks like no one is in the community, so they have to shift the borders of your electoral district to include all of these other spaces. That means that elected official is no longer accountable to just your community. They're accountable to your community plus all of these other people. And that's going to decrease your ability to get votes passed, to get legislation passed in communities that are going to have policies that are going to positively impact you. So it matters for those bus routes. It matters for the grocery stores. A lot of us live in food deserts. If there is funding for food allocation, and no one has said we live here, you will continue to live in a food desert. For those of us who are living in black communities that are dealing with issues like hypertension, high blood pressure, prostate cancer, fibroids, diabetes, you got the sugar, you got the all of these things that are very common, so common in our community that we have non-medical terms for them, but we all know what they mean. When the Center for Disease Control decides what types of issues they're going to study and where they're going to send money for research to be done on how to address various medical concerns if nobody with massive amounts of fibroids in the community is saying, hey, fibroids, we are a part of a population that deals with fibroids a lot. We are a part of a population that deals with sickle cell a lot. We need specialists. We don't just need a hospital with an emergency room to take care of gunshot wounds, right? We need specialists who are going to be able to tap into those particular issues. And so being able to have an accurate count on census is going to determine where that CDC money goes. So that was a very long answer to the question, but
answer because this is, if people were wondering how civic engagement and the census were related, now you know.
That's right.
Perfect explanation for that. Folks, we have to control the resources in our community, and it is hard work, but it's a very simple formula.
That's right.
It is about knowing who your representatives are. It is about showing up. It is about writing, talking, screaming, whatever you need to do about what it is you need in your community.
Right.
I love, but I gotta double up. I'm gonna flip for a moment. I love the barbershop. I love the nail salon. I love talking to people after church. But let's be very clear. That conversation stays with us and no action happens after.
That's right.
If you need some action in your community, you're going to have to do this work.
That's right.
So Lurie has already invited you to come out to the Dick Black meeting next Tuesday at 10 a.m. You should do that. You should be at your community board meetings. You should be writing your elected officials.
That's right.
More importantly, you should be staying tuned for this conversation because you need to know what to do to be a part of the census.
That's
and
right.
Get ready for the census.
That's
so
right.
We want to thank her for those answers.
Thank you.
We're going to continue with the civic engagement conversation because I want to talk about the fact that just recently there was a report that actually championed the fact that we were up to 48% of people in New York City volunteer in their community or outside of their community.
Yeah.
Now, they were celebratory because it is twice the number of people that used to volunteer.
It used to be so much
but
lower.
You and I know if we came home with a 48 on our test,
right,
nobody was happy.
That's right.
Right? And
that's
we were
right.
probably trying to hide that if that was the case. Can I just take another test before? Because I can't take that home, right? So, 48% of the people are active.
Right.
How do we get other folks engaged, especially in the census work, given some of the fears?
You know, I think we have to have honest conversations that center on what matters to people who are going to be directly impacted. So even myself, if you'd have told me 6 years ago, census, you need to care, right. I'm like, dude, have you seen the issues of police brutality? Have you seen what's going on with racial violence? That's what I'm worried about. And that makes sense because most of us are never really taught how much is relying on these types of civic engagement, right? And so if you don't know, it's hard to make it matter. But when I go into a space where there are religious leaders and we're having a conversation about why they should care, I have to find a way of finding out what is important to them and seeing how something like census impacts that, right? So what does that mean? Let's say you're from an immigrant community that is, in this environment, administration, realistically very afraid about filling out the census. I have to have a message that's going to be targeted to the needs of that community that is going to, one, address the fear, and two, empower them to create solutions around the fear. So one of the things that we're talking about in just in terms of active engagement is there are communities that have made up of largely new immigrants who have not as yet really completely engaged with civic engagement, and so getting them to fill out the census, one, there's language barriers. It's challenging because their concerns don't necessarily lend themselves to census-related issues. We have conversation with this community, and then we find out that they are a very vendor-driven, street vendor-driven community, meaning that most of the financial resources that community brings into its space is driven by people who have carts, selling food on the street, selling bags on the street, selling scarves, selling any host of wares, but that's how they make their money, and what we often consider the underground economy, even though in New York it's very heavily regulated, right? Those communities need to understand how street vendor licenses are determined by census dollars, or how the locations for where they will be able to set up their shops. Right? There was some communities.
Yes, there was a move.
There was a move
in our community.
That's right, to push them out.
Business.
That's right.
Put them over there.
Exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly. So being able to talk with that community about what is most important to them, and then tying that to how that most important issue is going to be related to the census. I think otherwise, I'm just sort of talking in your ear, and it's going in one ear and out the other. So we have to find out what's important to these communities, and that means we have to be culturally competent. So if I'm not a part of the community, though I may have a black face and nappy hair and clearly am a part of the African descendant community, if you ain't never seen me walking your block, I don't know her.
Exactly.
Who is that?
Yeah.
This lawyer from Brooklyn, what is she doing in the Bronx?
We need more community validators.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Right now, we're organizing, trying to get people to run for county committee. Because
right.
you live in a particular ED, you know who your neighbors are.
Right.
They trust you. They see you walking your dog,
exactly.
putting out your garbage, sweeping your stoop, whatever it is that they see you doing.
Yeah.
They're more likely to trust you than somebody that's coming in with a clipboard and a form.
That's exactly right.
So this is how we can get connected. Use your network.
That's right.
The other thing is everybody is very, 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 very busy.
Yes.
Very, very busy.
Trust me.
Okay.
We are busy.
But we're not so busy to let our resources go by the wayside.
Right. Because you know what's going to happen when your resources get cut? You're going to be a whole lot more busy trying to get those resources back. That's right.
Back. So, a couple of suggestions. Folks need to use their network.
That's
if
right.
you belong to a block association.
That's right.
Everybody doesn't have to go to every meeting.
That's right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Take a turn.
That's right.
If there's 8 of y'all, 8 months of the year, taken care of. That's
there you
when
go.
most community meetings happen.
Right.
So this way you can come back, share that information, and you've only committed in 1 month to 2 meetings.
Exactly.
Please tell me that you do not have 4 hours. 4 hours I need you all to have in a month to take care of your business, to take care of our community business.
And that's really,
important.
That's so important for African descendant communities, because when it comes to the era that we're living in right now, opting out may have been an option before. It really wasn't. But right now we are in an era where it's kind of like the end of Reconstruction, right? Where things that we thought were permanent, like a commitment to integration and to like ending racism, those things are not so permanent. So being able to be engaged and have access to controlling the levers that determine who gets power in our community, who gets access to resources in our community, that is vitally important now, way more than ever, for those of us who are in this space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about immigration. I want to talk
immigration,
about our Pan-African brothers and sisters around the globe that now make U.S. their home.
Right.
But have not finished their process to becoming full citizens, or for a variety of other reasons, they don't choose to become citizens. Right? So, but they're living here. We're all sharing resources.
Yep.
So let's talk about them.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about them in the context of New York being a sanctuary city. Because people hear that and it's like, oh, well, they don't have anything to worry about because they're here.
Yeah.
And the mayor stood up, the governor stood up, everybody stood up and said, public advocate said, listen, you're not messing with our folks.
Right.
Come to New York, we're protecting our folks.
Right.
So ICE has backed off in some areas, but they're very insidious in other areas.
Right.
And that fear is definitely out there.
Absolutely.
So we really need to talk strategies about how we help our immigrant brothers and sisters understand that what some of the protections are for them with regard to the census data.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the census data is different from you sharing that information, is different from your status and what ICE may be claiming.
Right. Really good question. So as it pertains to immigrant communities, first we have to know that the census data is protected by Article 13. And that is an article that says that if you are a census, all Census Bureau employees take an oath that is designed to respect privacy. If you share individualized census data, you can be arrested. You can spend time in jail. You can spend a whole lot of money paying those fines. The idea is that we want to make sure that people are confident that their information is going to be protected, that their data is going to be protected. Now, here's the thing. Census data is already being used, right? I can go online right now, go to census.gov, and be able to access a whole host of information about a variety of communities. If you're on a smartphone, the government knows where you're at. Right. If you're logging into Wi-Fi, the government knows where you're at.
I know where you are.
Right. So we have to be clear that the information we are concerned about, that private personal information, your individual address is not going to be shared with anybody. Now, the government will be able to give out statistical data about the information. So does this community have a whole lot of senior citizens? Yes. How do we know that? Census data. Does this community have a whole lot of youth who need access to youth programs? Yes, we know that because of census data. Do they know that Stefani Zinerman lives at 123 Main Street Boulevard, and that she's got 5 people who are here on an illegal immigration status, or who are not here in the country with permission, and that, you know, there's a secret bedroom that's housing an entire family? Nobody's going to know that. That information is not going anywhere. But here's the thing. If those 3 people are living in your building, you've got a secret family living in the they still need to take the bus. They still got to go to the post office. They still got to go to school. So they're still going to be using the services that are going to be allocated based on census data. But if you're not showing up, you're going to get the short end of that stick. So unless you plan on leaving, and I don't think you do in this scenario, we have to be clear that no one is going to be able to get your personal address and your personal information. But we do need to know that there are 13 people in a house built for 2, because those 13 people still have to drive on the street. Right now, realistically speaking, history would tell us that we have to also be doctor and patient and be leery about this, because the reason that article is in place to protect census data is because the last time that there was a distribution of census data was the information that was distributed to support the Japanese internment. So there are, again, historically very justifiable reasons for communities of color, for immigrant communities, to be concerned about census data. However, we have these protections built in place. Now, the reality is we have an administration right now that has been the most antagonistic to non-white communities, I think, at least in our lifetimes. If you are a Gen X person, definitely in our lifetime. So the fear is great. And the fact that the administration recently indicated that they want to put the citizenship question, I see people who are asking about this now on Periscope, the citizenship question on the census form. Yes. Then this data, and the reason this data was, this question used to be asked on census, and going back as far as the 1950s and before, and they took it out because they were concerned about that Japanese internment era, and there was a lot of shame around that. But this administration has said that they want to see a census question about citizenship put back on the census. Why is this problematic? This is problematic because, one, we already have a survey that takes care of citizenship issues and information, right? That American Community Survey that I mentioned, that is a survey that does gather information on citizenship. The problem with trying to get use the census for citizenship information is this. The Constitution requires a count of every person. Not every citizen, every person. Why? Because when you drive down the street, you don't drive down the citizenship road, the citizen lane and the non-citizen lane. When you go to the hospital, you don't go to the citizen hospital and the non-citizen hospital. When you go to school, you don't go to the citizen school and the non-citizen school. And I should say at least not yet, because of the way this country is going, from my lips to God's ears. But we don't have that type of division. And so it doesn't matter to me if you're a citizen or not. If we're all stuck in traffic together, we need enough lanes to accommodate all the cars that are going to be on that road. Absolutely. It doesn't matter to me if I'm stopping at a stoplight, if the person in the car next to me is a citizen or not, because we need a traffic light versus a stop sign in very busy streets. And that is determined by population, not citizenship within the population. So this question is really designed to be mean-spirited, and it is designed to encourage people to not fill out the census, because there are many people who don't want to pay for us. Exactly. And who do not believe that they should be putting out money for those things. So that said,
even though it's not their money.
Even though it's not their money.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. So that is a huge issue right now. And so we are encouraging everyone. And if you go to our website, or if you go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Center for Law and Social Justice, there's actually a petition that's circulating so that people can sign on and let your elected officials know, do not put a question about citizenship on the census, because I need safe roads. I need schools large enough to accommodate the people who are here.
Are you all hearing this? This is Civic Engagement.
Civic Engagement, 10, yes, right? Yes.
You have to sign petitions.
That's right.
Another way.
That's exactly right.
Be involved.
That's
Absolutely.
Exactly right. So call your elected officials, sign the petition, and then really start having this conversation. When you're in your religious houses of worship, when you are in your PTA meetings, when you are visiting family, talk with them about what's going on. Let them know what's happening, because if we don't, we will have another severe undercount. And when we have severe undercount, we have severe underfunding for our communities.
And we'll be underrepresented.
Underrepresented.
In the government.
Exactly.
Do not need that at all.
Exactly.
Alrighty. So we talked about basically as individuals how people can be involved.
Yeah.
But what sort of work should civic organizations like the Brooklyn NAACP do as well?
That's a good question.
What should we engage in?
That's a good question. So civic organizations like the NAACP and any organization that cares about these issues, one, I would encourage you, if you are in New York City, to sign up with Nick Black. Because that is what we are, amassing a coalition of organizations and individuals who are going to have a multi-year approach to this issue. Up to census and beyond, right? Because after census comes redistricting and apportionment and all these other things, which we'll save for another Periscope. But it's important that you, one, if you are not in New York City, or even if you are, you for some reason can't affiliate with our coalition, there are a number of coalitions across the country and across the state that are dealing with this issue. But call your local Census Bureau office. You can go online at census.gov and find out where your local office is at, and ask them what's happening with the Complete Count Committee in your area. Ask them how your organization can be a part of the Complete Count Committee, because Complete Count Committees are designed to make sure that the specific needs of hyper-local communities are going to be addressed. You can be
out there in Periscope.
Yes.
Anybody ever heard of a Complete Count Committee?
Have y'all ever heard of a Complete Count Committee for census? I mean, maybe not. I hadn't before I started doing census-related work, right? I had no idea. So it's something that people can find out about. Your organization can join. And if you get to that room, your Complete Count Committee, and you realize, I am the only melanated face in this space, you need to go get all the other organizations that have a toehold in your community and get them to the table. Organizing amongst the groups and the organizations in your community. If you know that there are hard-to-reach communities that may be very insular, maybe isolated for some reason, find ways of making inroads there so that you can begin having these conversations. There are going to be a number of online programs, webinars. I know Center for Law and Social Justice is going to be doing a lot of online work in the weeks and months coming up just to continue the education process. Right now we are in the middle of the LUCA update, which is the local the local update for census addresses, right? So if you have a whole bunch of new development in your community,
and if you live in Central Brooklyn,
yes,
you really
yes.
You walk down the street every day, and
it's a new condo with 100 people going to live in there, and none of them have kids, and so you need to make sure that the new developments in your community are going to be listed on the census registry, because if not, they're not going to get the postcard that's going to tell them this is your personal identification number. Go online, because the census is online this year. We didn't talk about that yet.
Yes.
Census is going to be primarily online this year, so you will not get that postcard that says go online. This is your personal identification number. Go in and log in and sign up for the census. So all of these things, it's a multi-pronged approach, and it really is going to require people to be way more engaged and invested than we have been before.
So if you are like me and are very connected to the senior technologically savvy, you know that this is going to be an issue for them with the online census. So we're going to have to talk about how we use our libraries and our community spaces to help them out. You going over there with your smartphone to answer the questions that they may have, help them fill out the form. This is going to be very, very important.
That's right.
And for those of you who were on my Facebook page earlier today and saw my mini rants about the Yale student situation, census work is important because we want an accurate count.
That's right.
And an accurate count also means accurate information. So the way your name is spelled, where you live, all of that is important.
Right.
So we're going to need some folks that we can trust to do that work.
Right. And we need organizations to be setting up pop-up centers.
Absolutely.
Education mini pop-ups, workshops. When it comes time to fill out the census from April 1 until of 2020, if you have libraries, community colleges, spaces where people can go online and access the materials and information, democratic clubs, whatever it may be, talk with them now about how are you going to set up a pop-up shop so people can come in, especially if we live in an area that has low broadband access.
And we've been doing a little bit of that work in the community for the last 3 years with participatory budgeting.
That's
so
right.
We all are familiar with that. Just pretend that you're coming to get some cute shoes.
There you go.
Whatever we need to do,
there you
have
go.
the people come to the pop-up shop.
Oh, they're saying they can't hear you. Stephanie, you got to speak louder. They're saying they can't hear you.
I was making a joke about pop-up shops and shoes. So I just want us to utilize all of our tools so that we are actually getting this data in, and it is accurate and is reflective of our community.
That's right.
So that we get those resources.
Yep.
Alrighty, so I want to talk about hashtags. Hashtags. We've talked about Pan-African people. We've talked about the fact that we need to be represented across the diaspora. But there's a particular way we need people to show up this year.
Yes.
So there's some hashtags out there. I'm not quite sure which one is going to be the one.
Right.
Because people are using them for different things.
Right.
But hashtag just black and hashtag be black.
Hashtag check black.
Check black.
Yep.
All right. I think I like check black.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. What are those hashtags meant to do?
I'm really glad you asked, because race is so important. It's so important right
Race,
now.
not color, people.
Race,
not color.
Race, not color. Race, not ethnicity or nationality.
Absolutely.
So let's break this down a little bit. I may be Jamaican.
Yes.
And I may be white Jamaican, Chinese Jamaican, I may be black Jamaican, I may be Jewish Jamaican, I may be black Jamaican, right? I may be Nigerian, I may be black Nigerian, I may be white Nigerian, I'm told that happens. I may be American, I may be black American, I may be white American, Chinese American, what have you. Southern Northern, right.
Even though that shouldn't be a thing. It's a thing, people.
Right, it is a thing. I may be black and from all of those spaces. I may have in Jamaica one particular way of understanding what the term black means. If I say black to a Trinidadian, it's going to evoke some concepts that may or may not be the same concepts that are evoked when I say black to a black American, right? We know that the diaspora, the Pan-African diaspora, and by that I mean continental African countries, Caribbean and black Latin American countries and people, and United States. There is this three-part trade, three parts of the triangle trade of which we, from which we all came. But there are very different ways of identifying race, and there are different treatments for race. If I come from a Latin American space and I am of African descent, slavery happened very differently in those spaces. And this is important because less than 5% of the enslaved Africans who were taken across the Atlantic came to the United States of America. The vast majority of African descended people who were enslaved did not make it to these shores. So that means a whole lot of black people don't speak English and might speak Spanish, right? Who are in this hemisphere, and we have to expand our understanding of what it means to be black. If you come from a country, you are a part of an immigrant family, and you come from a country where the word black means something very negative, and it just, it may, right? You may have preconceived notions about black Americans and what they do and they don't do. You may have all of those things, right? Yes. So you, if given a chance, would never say that you're black.
Yes.
Even though if you are picked up by a cop, you're black.
You're black.
Right? So the concepts that we have about race are very political and they're very home country based, right? So when I come to this country and you ask me what race I am, I might tell you I'm Puerto Rican. I may tell you I'm Dominican. Yes. I may tell you I'm, from any sort of country. I may never say black, right? Yes. Now, being from Trinidad, that's my nationality. That's not my race. That's not your race. Being from Nigeria, that's my nationality. That's not my race. You may believe whatever you want to believe about race and the term black in your home country. No issue there. Do what you got to do. But in this country, when we're talking about race, Nigeria is not a race. Trinidad is not a race. Jamaica is not a race. Now, I recognize why we have those issues, but what we need to understand is that when you are dealing with, on the census this year for the first time, black people are going to be able to have some of the options that other community groups have always had, right? We'll be able to say we are black and then indicate our nationality or ethnicity, right? So I'll be able to check black, and then I can say Jamaica. Yes. Or I can check black, and then I can say Nigeria. I can check black, and then I can say Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. I can check black because I know that in this country, again, regardless of how you think about the term or the issues of way that America deals with race, in this country, allocation of funds, protection of civil rights, distribution of dollars and resources are based on racial categories. Black is a racial category. White is a racial category. Non-Hispanic white or Hispanic non-white. These are categories that are recognized and upon which funding and protections of civil rights can be based. You know, it's not a racial category. Biracial. What's not a racial category? I should say what's not a racial category that is recognized for the terms of distribution and allocation of funds that are determined based on resources and data that look at race. What's not a racial category? Multiracial. What's not a racial category? Other. What's not a racial category? Nigerian, right? So you can be all of those things. Yes, you can, if you go home, you can put every flag that represents who you are up on your wall. You can do your ancestry, 23andMe, whatever you got to do. You may find out you got, 10% Nigeria, 40% Kenya. You can have every flag you want on the wall. You may even have 5% Irish, whatever. God bless you. French. But on the census, check black.
Check black.
Be black.
Be black. Because you are just black when you show up.
When you show up in this world.
There you go.
Listen, you're in America, so you have to understand and play the game the way Americans play the game. So write in Nigeria, because now we have an option. We didn't have it on 2010 census. Well, on 2020 census, we'll have the option. Write in Nigeria, write in Jamaica, write in, Puerto Rico, write in wherever you got to write in. But if you want the resources,
yes,
check black. Put your negative opinions and affiliations with the word black to the side. I get it. I understand it. We can talk about internalized white supremacy later. We'll do the healing and the therapy later. The Pan-African community must heal.
In this room, you have two
yes,
black girls.
That's right.
You got two.
We got you and you got me. We're both black. Where are your people from?
My father is from Alabama.
There we go.
My mother is from North Carolina. Well, Virginia by way of North Carolina.
Right.
Yes.
There you go. So my mother's from Jamaica. My father is from South Carolina by way of New York.
Yes.
So I'm checking black.
Checking black.
And then I can write in whatever else I want to write in.
I'm just checking.
I can write it in. Right.
I don't have the luxury of other people to just do everything else.
Right.
I am black all day. Proud of it. Always have been.
Hashtag
Glad I
check
don't
black.
have those issues.
Yes.
At all.
Yes.
But we need you all to understand that, especially for people who understand and utilize the fact that we have this diaspora and there's so many of us and we outnumber this, that, and the other. We're going to need y'all to act like it.
That's
act
right.
like this is, the census is Wakanda.
Oh.
Okay? Show up.
Right.
Show up. Tell
Right.
your story. Talk to your people.
There you
That's
go.
what we need you to do.
And then check black.
And check black.
And then turn in the forms.
And, oh, yes.
Fill it out. Hit enter.
We're going to continue these conversations.
Yes.
We're going to continue to encourage you all to not only get ready yourself personally for your family, to tell your story on the census, but we really want you to come out. Get these jobs, people.
That's right.
You don't need to be employed anybody else to come into our community.
That's right.
We need you all to come, get these jobs, do the census, take an accurate count.
That's right.
We need you to convince whatever civic group you're a part of, whether it is your faith-based organization, your Democratic club, whether it's the kids' Girl Scout troop, they can help too. We need this information to get out. It is very, very, very important. So we're gonna do special sessions for people who want to be trained trainers and help train other people.
That's right.
We're gonna talk about this technology piece. We're gonna talk about the data collection piece. All of it is important, but all of the basis for this is about civic engagement.
That's right.
Do you understand what's going on in your community? Are you stepping up? Because there's no person, I know everybody loves Olivia Pope. They're not on the air anymore, right? Something like that. But
No more scandal.
There's no more scandal. There's no more white hat. There's no white horse.
That's right.
You are that person that needs to show up in your community on a daily basis to do what needs to be done. And if you can't do it, then you need to talk to somebody else so that they can do it on Tuesdays, or you can do it on Wednesday, and a third person can do it on Thursday.
Exactly.
We are, and we know it's corny, we say it all the time, we're the ones we've been waiting for.
Listen, ain't nobody else coming. Either we build Wakanda with all the tools we got. And I'm not saying, don't at me and talking about doing the census is not the same as building Wakanda. I get it.
Yes.
But Wakanda ain't here.
Right.
Yet.
Yes.
Because we haven't built it yet.
Yes.
We're working on it.
We're working on it.
And so while we're here, we got to use the tools that we can to ensure that the sanctity of our people is preserved.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Next time we're going to have tripods.
Oh, yeah,
so we don't have to hold
but I
devices.
feel like that we got our fidget points in because you were holding up the phone.
Right. My hands weren't completely all over the place.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. It worked for that matter. So, for those people who still want to talk about having a voter teach-in on Saturday at Emmanuel Baptist Church, starting at 2 p.m. So come in. We're actually going to show this for some people who may have missed it. I'm going to list portions of it so you can get some census questions. But we really, really, really want you all to be a part of what's happening in your community. As I've been telling everybody, $85.5 billion on the city level.
Wow.
52 people control that money.
Wow.
51 council people and the mayor. On the state level, they just passed the budget, $169 billion, people.
Wow. Yeah.
Less than 200 people control that. So we have got to get engaged and understand what's happening so that we can demand the resources that we need for our community.
Well said.
Enough said on this topic. so glad you all tuned in.
Can I say, somebody just asked if we could send out the PowerPoint. We actually don't have a PowerPoint for this. I think we just did this because we've been talking about Census so long.
But I have a PowerPoint you can come and see.
Right, you can come see the PowerPoint this Tuesday. And if you're not able to be in New York City and you can't get in touch, you can't get to the Nick Black meeting on Tuesday, if you go to the CLSJ website, clsj.org, get on our mailing list. We're going to be posting the video from the workshop on our YouTube page. So definitely connect with us. We will connect with you. Our goal is to get this information in the hands of as many people as possible. And so if you can't be there in person, that's fine. But definitely connect with us and we can set you up with getting access to the info.
Very good. So this has been Lurie Daniel Favors, Esquire, from the Center for Law and Social Justice, and Stefani Zinerman, a.k.a. Civic Boss BK.
Civic Boss.
And we are so glad that you joined us. Have a good night.
Good night, y'all.